You're listening to the Counterculture Mom Show. Our kids are under fire every day, with the media and pop culture persuading them to give up their faith and Christian values. Stay tuned now as former Hollywood actress and pop culture expert Tina Griffin helps you counter these messages and safely navigate today's pop culture chaos.
Put your seatbelts on, people. This is going to be a wild episode. For as early as I can remember, I have been abducted by non-human alien entities, possibly hundreds of times. I have seen many UAPs, UFOs throughout my lifetime and suffered emotional and physical ailments due to the things they did to me. I pray that I can utilize my experiences to glorify God, to share the truth, and to help others in any way that I can. That coming from our next guest, Karin Wilkinson. Karin is the author of Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. She is a regular writer contributor to L.A. Marzulli's monthly newsletter, Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural. This is the Counterculture Mom Show. I'm Tina Griffin. Nephilim is the theme of the week. To help us better understand Satan's attack against God's creation, I'm with author Karin Wilkinson. How you doing, Karin?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Tina, for having me on. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you today. And thank you for the good work that you do.
Well, thank you so much. I am so thankful God had our paths cross. And just to preface this wild, insane interview, we might have actually a doubleheader episode depending on what God blows open on the next 22 minutes. You are a normal person. You're a wife, mother, and grandmother. You worked in the software industry for many years, but some insane things have taken place in your life that you're going to share with America and beyond today. And we have to go there because churches are not addressing this. You hardly find books on the subject. L.A. Marzulli, I've been researching for about 20 years. Love the man, what he does. When we seek knowledge, God is going to give it to us. And he will give us the spirit of discernment to know exactly what is truth from false. So the fact that you're on this program today, God made it very clear to our team, and he's guided every step of the way for the last 3 years. We're coming up on a 3-year anniversary right now, Karin, with this program. Blows my mind. I was praying that we'd last 3 months. But he told me when we were talking about Nephilim as a team, now is the time. So we're going to go there. Genesis 6. Churches don't address it. So you have a wild story. Everybody literally put your seatbelt on, and you will want to watch this episode probably 2 or 3 times and then share it with everyone you know, because it will make complete sense when we line up your story, Scott Mitchell and L.A. Marzulli's info this week, along with opening up the Bible. God will show us exactly what's going on here with the state of our culture today and Satan's agenda and who wins in the end, which is obviously God. So with that said, your book, Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest, what in the world did you drop in this book?
Well, this book, yes, is about my lifetime of abduction experiences. And the reason I wrote this book, I felt led to write this book, is because I didn't see anything out there addressing the abduction phenomenon from a Christian perspective. So I thought it was time to tie what's happening in with scriptural references that help people understand who and what these things are from a Christian perspective and what their agenda is and how to stop it. And to let people know that it's okay to talk about these things because there's such a stigma behind it, and that you're not alone, because I've encountered just hundreds of people with the same story as mine, with a similar parallel story to mine. And so I had a near-death experience about 8 years ago. And after that, went through some PTSD therapy. And that therapy allowed me to deal with a lifetime of memories. I had the memories. I did not go through therapy or anything like that. I always remembered these things that happened to me. But the PTSD therapy helped me to deal with them in a healthy way, so that I could then share them with others and share that healing process with others. And that's what led me to L.A. Marzulli and eventually to this book.
It's unbelievable. We're going to unpack all of this. You talked about near-death experience, PTSD. I can hear people saying, hang on, I need her for an hour. I will just preface this episode by saying that we had Calvin Parker on, and I want to dedicate this episode today to our previous guest, Calvin Parker. He just passed away from cancer about a year ago. He was abducted by demonic entities, aka aliens, and we could talk about your thoughts on what you believe aliens are. We're going to go through that today. But I just found out he passed away, and I bawled when I saw the update. He had one wild story. Listen to his story about being abducted on this craft. I absolutely believe, and you need to hear it. So go to counterculturemom.com, listen to his story. And I believe this is all deception for the end times. I believe when the rapture does happen and a lot of people disappear, it's going to be blamed and pitted on alien abduction business. It is happening. So you have a similar story with Calvin Parker. Please watch it, you guys. Also, I saw a UFO when I was 13, 12, somewhere in there. So my mind was open to the fact that there is something else out there than just us. And we're going to dissect that today. So just to give a little meat behind what you just said. You wrote this book, Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest, connected with Ellie Marzulli to now work with him today on writing all these articles. You talked about what inspired you to actually write this book. Can you go back in time and just tell us about your life experience? What did you go through? What happened to you? And I mean, take your time, but dig in deep on literally the breeding process. Right. People need to know what happened to you.
Right. I'll start with when I was, my earliest memories are of being taken by non-human alien entities. At 5 or 6 years old, I would wake up in the middle of the night and, I would initially look for a place to hide before I'd go to bed because I knew they were coming. My life was just terror every night. I would wake up at night and feel a change. I could feel evil in the room. I could feel an evil presence. Sometimes there'd be a light coming through a window or a very low vibrational hum that would accompany them. Oftentimes I would just close my eyes as tight as I could and put the covers over my head because I didn't want to see them. Because in my room, somewhere in the room, sometimes beside the bed, sometimes in the corner, in a doorway, often in a window, sometimes hovering over me, would be at least 2 or more of what people call a typical gray alien entity. They had bulbous heads, the black screen eyes that didn't look like eyes. They didn't move. They looked like a screen. Mouths that didn't open. They were short, very thin, very skinny necks that looked like they couldn't even hold that head up. Some of them smelled very bad, like sulfur, dead animal, kind of putrid smell, but not all of them. And at that point, sometimes I would be put into a state of waking paralysis, which is like sleep paralysis, but I was wide awake, but suddenly I couldn't move. And I would be levitated off of my bed, and I would go through a closed window or through a ceiling. And I know that sounds crazy, but, I would get so close to that ceiling, I could describe to you every detail of like my grandma's ceiling with the wallpaper and the little curls on the edges where it was just slightly brown, or the bugs in the light, or the tops of the picture frames where there would be dust or things on it, or the screen as I got up to the window. And my body would feel like it was just going into like a bazillion little pieces. Often at that point, I would just go into like a sleep state. Like they would just put me into a sleep state. I would wake up often at a bank of elevator doors, look like elevator doors, and still with a couple of these shorter gray alien entities. And I have a lot of comments to make about them later. We would get in these elevators that would just go down and down and down. And then I would and it was always so cold. I remember just always being cold when I was little. And we would get on what I called the sideways elevators when I was little, because there were benches in them, and they would go side to side, or sometimes up at an angle or down at an angle. And we're talking in the 60s and 70s when vehicles were loud. There weren't any quiet vehicles. Right. So I realized this was some sort of high-speed transport, probably like a tram or a train. So I just referred to them as the sideways elevators in my head. And at this point, some different things would happen. Sometimes I would be examined. Sometimes I would be put in a room with other little kids, and we would play with weird toys or just standard coloring books and crayons and things like that. It would just depend. It was terrifying. You know, I was alone. I was scared. I was tortured, for lack of a better word. And then I would be returned. And it's so emotional to talk about, because then I would be returned back to my bed. Sometimes my pajamas would be inside out, or not even on, like at the foot of the bed, or in another room of the house, or I would wake up in another room of the house. And I would go often, and after I was returned, go and try to sleep under my parents' bed, because I thought maybe I would be safe there, and we weren't allowed to get in their bed at night, you know. And I tried to talk to my parents and my friends and my teachers about it, but I didn't have vocabulary to say who and what these things were.
Okay, you were living with your mom and dad, because you mentioned your grandmother's house as well. Did she also live with you?
No, we would just visit there as well often, and it happened at home it happened wherever I was.
That's just unbelievable.
So,
And this never happened to your parents or your grandmother or any other family member?
I do believe it did, but I will not speak for other people or tell other people's stories without their express consent or permission. So, but based on the things that they told me later, yes, it appears that this was something that was happening throughout the family.
And did you live in a normal house, like in a city, in the country? What city, what state, like what area?
I grew up in Central Ohio, and my parents' house was just in a regular kind of small town, normal neighborhood, middle class. And then the farm, we had a family farm where my grandparents lived, very rural, down on the Ohio River, very near some highly charged sites. We lived near the Serpent Mound in Peebles, Ohio. We lived near a lot of what they call the ancient Indian mound areas, which we know are Nephilim mounds, not Indian mounds, but that's a whole nother conversation. So sometimes rural, sometimes city, but it didn't matter where I was throughout my life. I was taken no matter where I was.
And
I could
how
have been at a
often?
friend's house.
It's so crazy. And when you were being taken from these different locations, no one else in that house at that time saw you being taken.
Right. And if there was someone else in the room with me, like a sibling, or say I was married at the time, or maybe at a sleepover, if I tried to wake up another person who was there, they would be put into such a deep sleep state that I couldn't rouse them. Nothing would wake anyone else up. I mean, if I tried to scream at the top of my lungs or make any kind of noise, no one even moved.
Yeah, they did. They were, yeah. And your voice probably wasn't even heard. Like you thought you were screaming and it probably wasn't even heard. Calvin Parker's story blew my mind as well, because he also said he was he was fully awake, conscious, but he could not move. Like he was paralyzed. Okay. So when you said that, I'm like, chills down the back of my spine. So you were, you know what, commercial break, because of course I've already got 78 questions for you. So more with Karin, unbelievable, and her story right after this. Parents with kids at home, can I ask you something heavy but very important? Deuteronomy says to love the Lord your God with all your heart, to commit wholeheartedly to these commands and repeat them again and again to your children. But what if something happens to you and your spouse and you are no longer around to repeat them to your kids? EpicWill.com is here to help ensure your children are raised by guardians who will honor your legacy and raise them up the way you would want them to be raised. Trust me, you do not want a court deciding who will raise your children. Secure your family today by naming a guardian in your last will and testament, as well as the rest of your early estate building needs, like your advance directive, financial power of attorney, and more at EpicWill.com. We are never guaranteed tomorrow. Start the process now at EpicWill.com and use promo code TINA for 20% off. That's EpicWill.com. Protect your legacy and your children's future. I am passionate about my health and taking care of myself and my family. One company that I'm very excited to partner with is Ascent Nutrition. They provide holistic nutritional supplements for us and our pets. And they have the most incredible organic, mold and mycotoxin-free coffee on the planet. Their pine needle extract includes wild harvested pine needles, which improves immunity and brain function. I'm also using their humic and fulvic acid, which binds to heavy metals, supporting detoxification and increases my energy level. Their pine pollen tincture is a great support for libido and hormone health, and they have the cleanest source of omega-3s in their algae oil DHA, which is essential, especially for us moms and our kids. Head to goascentnutrition.com/Tina and use code Tina at checkout to save 10% off on your entire order. That code can be shared with others, so spread the word. 10% off using code Tina at goascentnutrition.com/Tina. Let's get our body back on track together. Karin, we're going to recap what in the world we just talked about in the last commercial break. My word. Let's go a little bit deeper into the gray alien deal. You know, studying Hollywood for 20 years, being out in Hollywood for a decade, it's not just movies they make up to entertain the audiences. They are warming people up for the mass deception that's currently taking place and will be a lot worse in the days to come, so that people take the mark of the beast, believe the Antichrist being God, and voila, you have scripture being fulfilled right in front of our face. So with that said, you see the little gray aliens, a little, movies with Steven Spielberg and his connection with the White House. They're not just entertaining. They are literally showing us what is currently going on behind the scenes that they are hiding from most of us. Not all of us. I mean, you got to see some of these things, so you can really talk to Steven Spielberg about what's going on. So going into this, E.T. is not just E.T. You have gray aliens you mentioned that were cookie cutter that came and abducted you. How many times would you say you've been abducted over your lifetime?
That's a good question. I have no idea. It would have to be hundreds. It would have to be hundreds of times, because it happened over and over and over and over again. I couldn't even count.
Okay, and from what age to what age?
Well, I don't even know what age it started, because from my earliest memories, around 5 or 6, when you start to have concrete memories, I remember being taken. But before that, I have memories around 2 or 3 years old of being afraid of certain family members who were tall and blonde and had large blue eyes and were very thin, because they reminded me of these Nordics and Nordic is a type of alien, non-human alien entity that I had already been in contact with, who were frightening to me as a little child. And so I had these fears that no one could understand as a very, very small child.
And you're saying that these, I forgot what you just called these people, these giant Nordics. Okay, Nordics. Mm-hmm. Yes, I am. Blurry Creatures. They have a killer podcast and a conference coming up end of October, early November. Check it out. They talk about these topics a lot, and it makes complete sense to me what's going on here. These Nordics, do you believe they're part Nephilim?
No, I believe, based on the ones that I've been around, that they are just a race of non-human alien entity. There are different races and types that I've seen when I was taken. And I believe, and not to take too big of a jump here for the audience, but for me, from a biblical perspective, the alien entities that were taking me, aside from the little grays, and I'll talk about them more, but are fallen angels. They are the fallen. They are fallen angelic beings. And just like us, there are different kinds, different shapes, different sizes, different types. And the Nordic were just one of many types that I saw. And they're not cookie cutter like Marvin the Martian walking off of, the spaceship that you see in a cartoon.
Right.
I mean, the grays all look different. There are reptilians that all look different. There were insectulin type that all look different. There were these Nordics that all look different. They don't all look the same. They're very different.
And do you think that these, you call them aliens, but I always thought like aliens are like demons, and it's hard for me to kind of say it correctly. Do you think that the aliens are demons? Or you said they're fallen angels?
Right. There's a difference between a demon and someone who is demonic. So if you look at the adjective of someone having demonic actions, they're acting in an evil way. But then a demon itself, we know from the non-canonical book of different, it's in Jasher, it's in Enoch, and different non-canonical books and ancient texts refer to demons as the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim when they're killed, because they were neither heavenly nor earthly. They were a mix of angelic and human. Those spirits were doomed to wander the earth and without a body. So one of their things is always looking for a body to inhabit. So a demon is basically a spirit of a deceased Nephilim. Whereas a demonic, yes, a fallen angel is going to act in a demonic way, an evil way.
Okay, you're blowing my mind. I've got to slow this down for Tina's pace because my mind is like literally right now. I'm going to break it down. Tell me if I'm correct. Nephilim, fallen angels, find the daughters of men, find them beautiful. We have that scripture there that we referred to in Scott Mitchell's episode. They have sexual relations. That is now a Nephilim, not fully human. And that Nephilim, when that Nephilim looks like somewhat of a person, like maybe you could you tell a difference between a Nephilim and a full human by looking at them?
I think it would depend on the individual Nephilim, because they are, in biblical times, most of them are referred to as giants, the mighty men of old, so they definitely looked different. But now, based on what others have seen, what I have seen, they look more human, more like us. There are differences, but I believe, the Dr. David Jacobs has a book called Walking Among Us. This book describes people who have had interactions with modern day Nephilim, modern day hybrid entities. And I have a friend, Al Matthews, who has had interactions with a modern day hybrid, and they can pass for human, but there are differences. There are things that you would pick up on if you're watching, but most people are looking down at a phone or paying attention to something else or listening to something and not having the awareness around them. We as a society are being trained not to be aware of our surroundings, and we're missing it.
All right, more with Karin right after this.
Have you ever wanted to start a charity or ministry? Launching a nonprofit can be time-consuming, expensive, and overwhelming. If you have a vision and mission, but don't know where to start or how to raise donations, Capstone Legacy Foundation is your solution. Their ministry charity project allows you to receive tax-free donations without the expense and hassle of forming your own 501c3, and in less than 48 hours. This ministry partnership fund is exactly how Counterculture Ministries got its start, and we grew quickly. Capstone Legacy Foundation handles all your legal and accounting paperwork, allowing you time to develop the ministry and message God gave you. Call Capstone today at 610-688-8890 or check out capstonelegacy.org for more information. And tell them Tina sent you. Partner with Capstone Legacy Foundation to transform our culture for Christ and get your nonprofit started today.
The Jace case is a pack of 5 antibiotics. We put these antibiotics together very purposefully. They were curated in a way that covers the most common as well as the most deadly bacterial infections that you might encounter. In addition, it includes a guidebook to the safe use of the medications that is written in a way that's accessible for most people to be able to look up what their symptoms are and what the proper medication is to take. The idea behind the Jace case is to allow everyone to be better prepared medically, to be empowered to care for themselves.
Since the pandemic began, our healthcare industry has had to transform. From receiving medication to physician visits, everything changed. Jace Medical is dedicated to providing proper access to medications before you need them. This protects against issues during travel or disruptions with supply chains, natural disasters, and other emergency situations that have proven to overwhelm our healthcare system. Secure your own supply of medication with ease and peace of mind.
Use code TINA for a discount at jacemedical.com.
Hey everybody, we're going to drop another bomb for you guys right now. This is the end of part 1. There's no way we want to rush through this. We're going to be talking in part 2 about several key things. Number 1, continuing on with the story that Karin shared on this episode with her being abducted hundreds of times, but they used her, as what you just said during commercial break, a human incubator. You were impregnated many times. We're going to talk about what that is and what they birthed out of you. That's insane, but makes complete sense when you line it up with the Word of God and what God warned us about. We're also going to go into more detail about the gray aliens, the different types, because you were talking about different types of angels. There are also different types of gray aliens. And we're going to talk about your counseling in detail, how you're helping other people. Karin, you rock. Don't go anywhere. I got to find out about this human incubator business right after this. Counterculture Ministries and the Counterculture Mom Show is made possible by the faithful prayer and financial support from friends like you. If you want to join forces and help us reach more people with this critical information, you can donate by heading to our website, counterculturemom.com, and click on the pink donate button at the top of the page. It's a complete tax write-off, and our team is pumped to have you by our side. Besides using the donations to reach multiple platforms to get this message out further, faster, your donations also make it possible for me to speak around this country. After a recent school assembly, a teacher emailed Counterculture Ministries saying, "Thank you for making it possible for Tina Marie to speak. Our students thought it was one of the best convocations ever." I love bringing truth to the youth, and I share a lot of thought-provoking insight to help teens and tweens realize their identity is not based off Hollywood, the media, celebrities, lyrics of songs, or video game scores. Help me help them understand their full potential is in Christ. Once again, to donate, just go to counterculturemom.com, click on the pink donate button at the top. Thanks again from the Counterculture Ministries team.
Thanks for joining us for the Counterculture Mom Show with your host, Tina Griffin. For over 2 decades, Tina has traveled the globe exposing how pop culture is glamorizing harmful behaviors without showing the consequences, and how these messages are wreaking havoc on today's youth. Through radio, TV, podcasts, and our app, Counterculture Ministries is reaching millions every week with a biblically based message for hope for today's teens and their parents. But we can't do that without your faithful prayer and financial investment. If you appreciate the ministry of Tina and Counterculture Ministries, would you prayerfully consider a generous gift right now? We have a donor matching dollar for dollar. You can give securely online by visiting counterculturemom.com or by texting the word donate to the number 55444. That's counterculturemom.com, or text the word donate to the number 55444. Every dollar is doubled. If you love this show, you can stay up to date on the latest critical issues affecting your family by catching all of our weekly episodes with resource links, signing up for our e-newsletter, and downloading our Counterculture Mom app, where you get timely pop culture alerts. Visit counterculturemom.com for more details. And be sure to join us next week for another edition of the Counterculture Mom Show with Tina Griffin, where we are rewriting Hollywood's script for our kids.